All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, Democrats have decided that the primary is over and Biden is the victor. It isn't really, and he's not, but details. So they, along with their media allies, have swiftly moved into the next phase of their operation, figuring out someone else to blame when he loses. Now, I'm not saying that Biden will definitely lose. I think you'd have to be a fool to say he's a shoe-in or a shoe-out at this point, given that we're in the midst of an unprecedented crisis, the likes of which America has perhaps never seen. But if you're the establishment, you can't exactly be feeling too comfortable right now with Biden's current performance. First of all, let's remember that the Democratic establishment did absolutely everything they could to avoid riding with Biden. Former Obama people signed up with a myriad of other campaigns. Reportedly, Barack himself worried about Joe embarrassing himself and ruining his legacy. Last election cycle, when Joe was considerably sharper and the obvious natural successor, the Obama people lined up behind his one-time rival and arch nemesis, eventual loser Hillary Clinton. This time around, Obama and co stayed conspicuously silent until they literally had no other option left but throw in with Biden in order to beat Bernie. At the last possible moment, they took Jill's advice, swallowed hard, and backed Joe. After all, no one knows Joe's flaws and shortcomings better than people who worked with him for 8 years in the Obama administration. And now they have the added bonus of getting to watch amazing moments in television history like this one.
Why doesn't he just act like a president? That's a stupid way to say it.
Donald Trump was asked on...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, probably best I don't.
And they get to watch with a pit in their stomach as Joe pulls in poll numbers like this one, showing only 24% of his voters are actually really excited, or this one, showing that only half of his supporters have even really committed to him. He does consistently hold a lead over Trump nationally, but that has to be small comfort since Hillary at this same point held an 11-point lead over Trump. And as we've discussed here previously, Trump has had constant negative media coverage for years now, while Biden has gotten a pass from the media and from all of his primary contenders in what has to have been the softest Democratic primary of all time. He is yet to have had one real negative ad run against him. He should have a total halo around him as he cruises to the Democratic nomination and Trump crashes and burns with an atrocious crisis response. But instead, Biden is barely clinging to a national lead. So what to do? Barring a Cuomo switcheroo, which Dems are 100% fantasizing about, they're stuck with Joe. There's not a whole lot you can do to amp up the energy or approach there. So they're already seizing on their go-to move. Blame Bernie. Whoopi Goldberg made a nice contribution to that effort yesterday, berating Bernie during his View appearance.
Because this feels a little bit like it did when you didn't come out when Hillary Clinton was clearly the person folks were going for. So can you explain why you're still in the race and what this path is that you see?
One of the reasons, that's not quite accurate. I worked as hard as I could to for Hillary Clinton. But the reason there is a path
Bernie, just so we're clear, you worked for Hillary, but it took you a very, very long time to hop in. And your people also, it took a very long time for them to hop in. So when I say that, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, I don't accept that characterization. But the point is, people have a right.
Why are you still in the
democracy. Race? What I am very worried about
is that people cannot afford to.
Well,
your plan is to stay.
Said that we are. Well, for the fourth time.
You're assessing.
We are assessing.
Okay. All right.
We are assessing.
Very good. Sarah?
How dare he continue to push his outrageous giving health care to everyone agenda in the middle of a, checks notes, global pandemic. This fits right in with the growing drumbeat around the idea that Bernie is selfish for staying in the race. California Senator and Biden backer Barbara Boxer recently said, "I just think it's a terrible decision for him to make because he looks very selfish." Now, I'm old enough to remember when everyone absolutely melted down over any suggestion that Elizabeth Warren, who managed to win only one solitary county in Iowa, drop out so that progressives could unite and have some shot at winning the nomination. She needed space, though, and it was unfair, and it was sexist, and her supporters needed their self-care time or whatever. Jennifer Rubin stepped up to submit the dumbest entry possible into this category of analysis, arguing at the Washington Post that Democrats should actively give Bernie supporters who I might remind you make up at least a third of the Democratic primary electorate and a disproportionate number of the sort of low propensity voters you most need to inspire, should just be ignored completely. Because after years of humoring him, the vast majority of Democrats, from super progressives to moderates, can now say out loud what they've said quietly. It has always been about Bernie. It's not a movement, but rather a vanity project. I have a feeling that will be news to the record-breaking number of people who donated to his campaign and the millions who volunteered and organized for selfish initiatives like, rescuing the planet from irreversible destruction and making sure people don't die from rationing their insulin. The idea that you can make up for enthusiasm by shaming voters is pretty unlikely to work out. And the math of substituting the 15 never-Trump Republicans who cycle through cable news green rooms for Bernie's young and working-class base is also unlikely to work out. But I have no doubt you'll be hearing this argument more and more. First of all, it's a sort of insanity that passes as logic routinely in D.C. But second of all, it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't try to win Bernie supporters and they vote for someone else or they stay home, then you get to blame them for your loss. You never have to acknowledge the failures of your anointed leader or bankrupt ideology. You don't have to adjust or self-reflect or really think about anything at all. You get off the hook entirely. Because the truth is, they all know how weak their chosen candidate is. And their biggest fear is that another loss to Trump would create a real reckoning within the Democratic Party that leaves them once and for all out in the cold. Better to hedge bets than get hopes up about actually doing the one thing they told us is the only thing that matters. They've said for years now that absolutely the only thing that counts, which is worth compromising all principles and values for, is defeating Donald Trump. That's the whole entire reason we have Joe Biden as the likely nominee. And now they may not even be able to deliver on that. It's incredible, Sagar, to already watch them hedge their bets and lay the groundwork for blaming Bernie once again.
That Whoopi interview was actually disgraceful. First of all, I'm like, are you working for ABC News now, Whoopi Goldberg, or are you still at The View? I mean, what was that? It's like,
I know.
It was pretty wild.
And what a waste of time when you have someone who is, number one, still in the presidential race, but number two, has a position of leadership within the United States Senate during a crisis.
Look, as you said, they would never have done that to Elizabeth Warren. They would have been take your time, what's going on? Or they would have phrased it very differently. Like, why do you think that the electorate is so sexist that they can't vote for you? Instead, they're like haranguing. And it was like the fourth time. I could see him getting it. But this is the thing about him. He should have hit back. Honestly, I think he should hit back more, which is you can't allow these people to walk all over you on national television. And again and again and again, they just seem to get away with it. I thought it was really disgraceful. But to your broader point, yes, they are going out of their way in order to try and frame it as Bernie is the reason that we're going to lose. That's why it's just like with the Hillary stuff. James Comey is the reason. All of that. Not the fact that she ran such a terrible campaign. Not the fact that she made a campaign so awful that it was so close in the first place that these little marginal things might have swung the election.
Right.
Maybe consider that. Maybe you said it was a slam dunk, right? Why didn't you do it?
Right.
Same thing around this time, is that they are to be like, oh, the suburbs, all of that. But it's Bernie who held back all of his people. No, it's your job in order to inspire a broad-based coalition that comes out to defeat Trump, if that's what you want to do, or if that's what you say you can do. This is what Barack Obama did. So they all know he was able to inspire Democratic faithful, younger voters, new voters into the electorate. He won by a lot of votes, both in the popular vote and the electoral. It's actually not very difficult.
Here's what we were told about Joe Biden, that he was the electability candidate. He was the person to back if you want to beat Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That's the whole entirety of the sales pitch for Joe Biden. He's the electability candidate. And yet, how can he be the electability candidate on one hand, and on the other hand say he's basically so weak that he can't tolerate any competitor even being in the race? I mean, Bernie's not saying anything negative about Joe at this point. Maybe he should be, but he's not. Right? He's focused wholly on the crisis. And so if your candidate is so weak that they can't tolerate any dissent or even competition, maybe you should get a different candidate.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it is crazy. After we talked with Harvey J.K. and what the professor, and what he was saying was that Bernie should be fighting with Joe Biden. He should be like, listen, I'm not coming over to you. I'm not bringing my people over unless you're about to give some serious concessions. But over and over again, he talks about the crisis. He just says, we believe in democracy. I want people to be able to vote. He's not drawing those contrasts. And I get it, because he doesn't want to lean into exactly this type of attack. But what does this show you? even when you bend over backwards to get Hillary Clinton elected, even when you go out of your way to say Joe Biden will win, they will still blame you.
Yes.
So you get all of the downside and none of the upside.
Yes.
They're going to say it about you no matter what you do. So you might as well act like it and actually get something that you want.
Right, absolutely. They're not going to give you anything that you want unless you force them to. And, I'm glad that he's staying in the race so that he can continue to have a prominent position, so he can continue to advocate for his ideas. I don't really care about the Democratic Party platform. It's like a worthless kind of a thing. I know that's part of what they fought for last time, was to have more delegates to the convention.
Yeah, how'd that work out for
so that they could get, some of their things out of the class. I mean, I don't think that that's really worth that much. But staying in so that you have that prominent platform and you can use your campaign infrastructure to organize around the crisis, I think that's important and I think it's essential. And by the way, look, I think Joe is a very weak candidate and there's new allegations coming out against him. You're in unprecedented times. Anything could still happen. It's unlikely, but anything could still happen. And so the minute that Bernie drops out, then obviously, of course, he's not going to be the nominee. And you could see Democrats also trying to maneuver things so that maybe they swap out Joe for Cuomo, because that's the bottom line here, is they all know how weak he is. I mean, they all dragged their feet to keep from having to throw in behind him. They were all desperate to find anyone else who could carry the mantle, because they know better than anyone just how weak he is. And so when you see these pieces already blaming Bernie, aides already run into the press. We talked about Jonathan Easley and Amy Parnes had a great piece yesterday. Aides run into the press saying they're so worried that Bernie's going to ruin everything again. It's because they're wholly lacking in any confidence in their anointed candidate.
That's right. Good luck, folks.
Coming up, what is next for the Bernie Sanders campaign? The HuffPost Daniel Marins is here to tell us what he knows.